Hey gang, this is Joshua with a couple of announcements. First, Caleb and I are going to take a couple of weeks off from posting an animated discussion so we can try and enjoy the last gasp of this hellish year with less work and more loved ones. We'll be back with a fresh pod for you on January 6th, 2021. Second, and this is embarrassing, but you're going to hear a few high-pitched chirps in this episode. The smoke alarm in my office decided that was the right moment to need a new battery, only I didn't have any new batteries to give it. Caleb and I persevered, and I edited out as many as I could, but we thought it was more important to get you an episode rather than worrying about a handful of annoying noises. Other than our voices, I mean. You're stuck with those annoying noises. So from all of us at Pulp Diction Productions to all of our listeners, happy holidays! You're listening in on an animated discussion about Superman the Animated Series with two experts in their fields. I'm Joshua Unruh, superhero scholar.
And I'm Caleb Masters, your friendly neighborhood film critic extraordinaire from thecinematropolis.com. And today's topic is Speed Demons. Man, Joshua, this episode was so good, it felt like it was over in the blink of an eye. It was so fast.
It just flew by, didn't it? It just flew by.
Like flashes before your eyes. It was gone. It was so great. Man, this is a fun episode. This is like one of those episodes I watched when I was a kid, haven't watched since, and remember being like, yeah, there's a really cool episode where Superman races the Flash. This is it. And I'm happy to report that it lives up to how I remember it, which is not as common as one would think, where things that you finally remember are actually as good as you remember.
Well, I mean, not to denigrate the entire enterprise, but I think we're running into some of that as far as New Batman Adventures and Superman the Animated Series largely. Like the highs are really high and the lows are kind of mediocre, right? But this remains one of the highs. Like it's not doing anything just super meaty. It's just like, here is a team up episode with a reasonable plot that they can solve together with a little bit of competition. Let's watch the sparks fly. And as far as that goes, it nails it.
Yeah, tons of fun chemistry between Flash and Superman. Weather Wizard, I've got some notes, but also he got the job done well. Could he have been a lot more impressive? Yeah, sure. But we'll get to that. But Joshua, I think the first question we have to ask is the design, the Flash design. What did you think? Are they basing it on a specific comic book design you want to talk about?
Okay, so the costume that the Flash wears is essentially the same as when he debuted way back in the 60s in the Silver Age. There was a Golden Age Flash who looked very different, had a very different look, no mask, no cowl, wore a Mercury-style helmet, still had the lightning bolt motif, but was not a full body stocking. It was really a different shift moving into the Silver Age. And the Silver Age costume is designed originally by Carmine Infantino, who is a legend. And frankly, cards on the table, the Flash's costume is one of the all-time greats. One of the all-timers. Simple, clean, gets the point of the character across quickly and obviously. Even if you get confused for a second and think he might have lightning powers, then you see the Mercury wings on the helmet and you're like, never mind, he's fast. I get it. I love it. I guess I have two questions about this costume. The one that's specifically about the design is, I'm not sure why they chose to do this extra super thick black line around the white circle. Like, it's not a bad decision, but it also kind of doesn't fit the aesthetic. But it's also bold and striking, so I'm just not sure what they were doing with that. But that big, thick black line is really the only deviation from the comic book costume that there is. The other little wrinkle is that we're going to have to decide which Flash this is, because there have been two Flashes that wore basically this costume. One is the original Silver Age Flash, Barry Allen, and one is his nephew who took over when he died, Wally West. The big difference between their two costumes is the belt. Barry's belt was like a continuous lightning bolt that went in all the way around a never-ending circle, like an actual belt that was just in a lightning bolt motif. Wally's is a connected belt in the back, but then comes to two lightning bolt points that meet like where the belt buckle would be. And so from that perspective, this is Wally's costume. Now, I'm going to put a pin in that for now because we'll talk more about his character that will probably tell us which Flash it is. But I wanted to point out they did make a specific design choice with the belt as far as the identity of the man behind the mask.
Okay. I that would normally be a beautiful segue, but we've got one other major character design to talk about, which is Weather Wizard.
What do you think about the Weather Wizard? I need to hear what you think first, because I actually have some gently positive things to say about it, but I feel like you've got some feelings here, Caleb. Tell me about them.
Well, actually less to do with the costume design and more with just the way they utilize the character overall. Costume-wise, I think it's good. Like you said, simple, clean, to the point. I understand what his deal is. I like kind of like the weird sunglasses he's wearing. I get that really clear business vibe off the character, but then he almost like when he knows he's one of those guys who isn't really a super over the top comic book villain, but he's playing one. And I feel like the costume reflects that pretty well overall, because we see it at the beginning. He just walks in, he's wearing like a nice button up kind of suit looking vibe, and then he's like, all right, time to go to work. And he puts on his kind of over the top, simple, but a little bit over the top, a little bit, tiny bit flashy costume that he wears for the cameras that he uses to demonstrate his point, which is I can control the weather. And I think it does it pretty well overall.
Yeah, I think I agree. It's sort of fine, like C+, B-. I really like this wild choice of these very 80s shades, these big, just wrap around like my grandma wore, honestly, back in the day. And the black gloves that look like they're supposed to be rubberized, which makes sense because he's carrying that wand that shoots lightning all over the place. Those two things, like the kind of almost lab coat type thing he's got going on in his torso, and with the gloves that go to his elbows and with the glasses, it's almost a mad scientist vibe. But if I'm being real, it also feels a little unfinished. Like it feels a little rushed. Like they needed something to like fully take him either into mad scientist route or to really play up the wizard part of it. I mean, I don't know that that's necessarily a great idea, like going whole hog wizard, but something to really like tie the outfit together, if you don't mind me paraphrasing the dude.
I mean, come on. I'm never upset about anyone paraphrasing the dude, Joshua, anytime. I guess my only other, it's kind of reminiscent. It's not from a Tron movie, but it kind of feels like it is.
Yeah.
It's got that. I like how you kind of you mentioned like the sunglasses and the coat. It just looks like it's reminiscent of that era of the 80s, I guess. And it works pretty well because even by this point in the 90s, that look is very dated and theatrical. So I really think it's meant to be kind of goofy and theatrical for the camera that he's putting out there.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm also willing to admit that it may be my familiarity with his various comic book looks, which are much more flamboyant. That just kind of makes this a little bit of a disappointment for me, but it's not bad. It just feels like it's, sometimes you have an outfit and you need something that'll really tie it together. You need an accessory or something, and the glasses just aren't doing it, quite to the level that I would like it to.
I guess maybe we could talk about, I'll just say this will segue right into my thoughts on, Weather Wizard as a whole. And I know the bigger conversation that we'll wrap up on will probably be the Flash. But here's the thing. Weather Wizard here.
Let's start with the Weather Wizard. That makes sense. We have some things to say about him, but they're nowhere near as much as the interaction between Superman and the Flash, which is, spectacular. So yeah, let's start with the villain, who is, and again, I will use a word we like on this podcast, that is not shade. He's a workmanlike villain. We need to have a villain who can get these two heroes to team up, and we don't need him to do much more than that.
Joshua, workmanlike is a great word for it, because the Weather Wizard, I actually overall like the characterization. I like the idea that he's a con artist who's only playing at the Weather Wizard, but he's really just an extortionist. But he's an extortionist who's a professional extortionist. Like I said, when we meet him, the impression I get is this guy is a businessman who is doing a thing to make money. And in this case, doing the thing means you stealing his brother's technology and using it for his own ends that are pretty awful. And I enjoy it because he doesn't seem like he just wants to cut to the chase. Hey guys, I'm gonna hold a ransom. You're gonna give me money, or I'm gonna blow a bunch of stuff up. I'm gonna summon a giant storm on top of Metropolis. So pay me money. So I kind of like that aspect of him. But I also think, going back to the extortionist piece, it's actually, again, I think he's a much smarter, more competent character than Parasite. But in the same way we talked about Parasite, who actually has these amazing godlike powers, who doesn't really utilize them in a meaningful way, I feel that way about Weather Wizard. His goals really are pretty. I mean, I know he's starting to blow up. He's starting to destroy Metropolis with the storm, but at the same time, he's got the power to end climate change, to speed up climate change. He could raise Atlantis from the sea. He could, bury the entirety of the United States. He's got, if you really think about it and take it to its logical conclusion, godlike powers. And at the end of the day, he's just kind of a really low level. I would say low level is not the right word. He's a white collar criminal who just wants the same thing all criminals want, which is money. And that's about it. That's all there is to him, really.
I agree. And I think that is a feature, not a bug, especially because, what he needs to do for this episode. And I will say one thing about him as a character that I really like is that they make no bones about his villainy. Like, he is threatening entire cities or like whole coasts of Australia. That is so big, which is good for a superhero story, but is a little hard to get your arms around, as far as villainy goes. But then when he just decides to murder his brother outright, I was like, oh this is a villain. This is a very bad man. Because it makes it personal, right? Like, it gives it a handle for us to grab onto and go, that's bad, in a way that those other much larger things make it more difficult to do with.
Definitely. But I will say everything about this guy is transactional, I guess is my point, because even when he decides to murder his brother, it's not like I have this vengeance. I want to murder you. It's like, bro, you're rocking the boat a little too much. I got to take care of you. Sorry.
He's just wrapping up a loose end.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's all business. You know what I mean? It's all just very transactional. Yeah. Give me money. I destroy city. If you know what I mean, like brother gets in the way, well, he's no longer an asset to this project, so we should just cut our losses, And I find that interesting, and I do like that aspect about him. It's just fascinating. And again, I don't think it's a bug. I just think it's a fascinating way to bring in this character with, like, again, borderline godlike powers. Really, at the end of the day, just wants to make a few bucks.
This is a thing that we will see come back up much further down the road in Justice League Unlimited when we visit Central City and we really get to know some of Flash's rogues. A thing that sets them apart is that most of them are just professional criminals who added a costume and a gimmick, right? They're not super villains in the way that, somebody like Lex Luthor or Dr. Doom would be. They're not low rent hoods like somebody like so much of Spider-Man's rogues gallery is, the Scorpion just wants to rob banks, but he's not actually very good at it, and giving him a whole bunch of power doesn't make him a better bank robber, and they're not all lunatics like so many of Batman's are. Like, they're just guys who were like, well, I'm a professional criminal, and it sure seems like a mirror gun or a heat ray or the ability to control the weather would let me steal stuff better. And I really like that. That is a really great cornerstone of the Flash's Rogues Gallery, which I have mentioned before is one of the handful of actually good superhero rogues galleries.
Most definitely. Now, but on the note of the Flash, Joshua, I think I've said about all I need to say about Weather Wizard. But
I agree.
The Flash, what about him? Who is this guy? We don't really know. He never gets a name.
We don't find out who he is under the cowl, right? And so it's a little bit of a question. Is this Barry or is this Wally? And I think you and I agree, because we've got some clues in the costuming. We've got some clues in his kind of like trickster, confident ladies man, kind of thing. That all feels a lot more like Wally, or at least Wally as he was at the time that the show was made. And I think I'm with that. I think it's Wally. What do you think?
I have no question in my mind. It's Wally West. The guy, he's a prankster. He's a ladies' man. He's very juvenile. He seems like he's 16 or 17, just like his mannerisms, the way he talks to people, his really black and white way of looking at things, the way he approaches conflicts, the fact that he's more, I don't think it's obviously his okay. The way his priorities are placed more on looking good and winning than they are necessarily doing justice. All of this stuff is a young Wally West to me. And I know, of course, this is sort of a spoiler, I guess, but we know that the Flash that we get in Justice League and Justice League Unlimited is named Wally. And even though the voice actor is different, the mannerisms are very, very similar.
I agree. So now I'm going to share a little bit of comic book nerdery that is the only argument I can make against it being Wally. So let's lay this on the line right now. In a race between Superman and the Flash, it doesn't matter who the Flash is, the Flash wins. He is the fastest man alive. It says it right on the cover. He's the fastest guy. That's it. Now, if it's Barry Allen, the Flash wins, but it's close. Maybe even a photo finish with Superman, especially a very Silver Age Superman who was crazy pants powerful. If it's Wally West, who's the Flash wins while Superman is still standing at the starting line, waiting for the echo of the gunshot to stop. Like, Wally is bonkers fast, even over and above the level of speed that Barry brought to the table as the Flash. So that's the only argument that I have against Wally, and I don't think that it's strong enough, especially considering that when we do get to Justice League, they still have Wally at a much more reasonable power level and much more Barry level of speed.
Well, and would you say maybe, again, this is so reading in between the lines and headcanoning things, but maybe one could say that the argument is this is a very, very young and inexperienced Wally who is still learning his powers. Maybe.
So the reason that we can't say that, there's actually a comic book reason for that. And it's a thing, it's one of the rare places that I think the DCAU is poorer in a way than the comic book universe, which is that if we have a Wally with no Barry, then we lose a huge chunk of his experience. So in the comic books, Wally operated for years as Barry's sidekick, Kid Flash. He and Dick Grayson are basically two of the people who grew up as superheroes. Like they get to stand in this odd space that I really appreciate for Spider-Man, where in their 20s, they are the elder statesmen, of their respective universes. Nobody's been doing it as long as these guys, right? And so the day that Wally put on the Flash costume, Barry was dead and he stepped into that role. He was not as fast as he would be, but he was incredibly experienced because he had basically been sidekicking for 10 years at that point.
Okay, that makes sense. So this was if one were to believe the headcanon I laid out, you'd have to assume that there was no Barry Allen, or at least a Barry Allen that exists in the DCAU altogether, which would fundamentally alter the origins of Wally West's The Flash. Okay, that's good knowledge.
I think Justice League backs that up. We never hear anything about a first Flash. We never hear anything about Barry. It's just Wally, and in fact, they put Wally in Barry's job when we get to Justice League. So I think that, when they have time to think harder about this character, and again, we'll talk more about this when we get to Justice League and get some looks behind the curtain at the Flash's life outside of the costume. But I think when they take the time to really think this through, they want Wally, but they want aspects of Barry. And so they kind of smooth it over, which I think is a fine choice. I have no real problems with that other than, being a longtime comic book reader, I really love the space that Wally fills as, that elder statesman. And also just because of the nature of comic book publishing, he's one of the few sidekicks that gets to permanently, and I'd like to say permanently, he's no longer the Flash. DC is actually screwing up the Flash and Wally really bad and has been for about the last 10 years. But until then, he was one of the tiny number of sidekicks who got to permanently, here the air quotes, permanently step into his mentor's role and stay there. It was really a shock when they decided to bring Barry back because they had spent so much more time with Wally and developing him as a character than they ever did with Barry.
Well, speaking about those differences in power levels between Barry and Wally West, this episode is chock full of Superman power level check-in gold. I mean,
yes,
we have lots of fun with Superman and the Flash's powers in this particular episode. Two that stuck out to me, Joshua, if you have any more to add, let me know. My first one being Superman was straight up frozen solid, like in the middle of an iceberg, and yet, even though theoretically normal beings or even normal metahuman would probably actually remain frozen at the molecular level, one could argue, Superman was able to maintain his super intense, super strong consciousness and I would say mental abilities to laser himself out of this iceberg, which was pretty funny and pretty cool. And it was even funnier when the Flash figured out how to get out by vibrating his body super fast to generate the heat, both of which I thought were great little nods. But I don't think we've ever seen Superman do something like this quite yet.
No, I agree. I don't think we've had the pleasure of him being entirely, like, totally frozen head to toe and having to burn his way out. And we have more power check-ins, but I just want to use that scene. There's a couple of scenes that I could use, but since we're talking about that one, I want to mention how stellar the animation is in this episode. I really think it is a cut above a lot of the weather aspects, especially the windstorm in Metropolis. Some of the racing, like there's an amazing character beat for Superman that I want to talk about in a minute, but just has gorgeous animation. And even watching like his eyes start to glow and it start to kind of steam up, you know, and turn to water and boil and stuff in there. The animation in this is spectacular. And I do think that the Superman escapes from the block of ice scene is a great example of that.
Well, I love the animation is pretty stellar. I love the globe-trotting aspect we get to see. We get to see a lot of different environments in this one. We get to see deserts.
That's true.
We get to see icebergs. We get to see oceans. We get to see cities. All sorts of different stuff. So, I think, there was more challenges involved, you know, just because there's more environments in this episode. And I would say the animation room really stepped up to the plate and hit a home run. Because, it's a stellar-looking episode of Superman.
And I think the other power level check-in is not quite as spectacular as that, but is still a pretty well animated effect that we have not seen. We've seen him use it a little bit, but not to the level that he did here. And tell me about that one. What was the other power level check-in you loved so much?
Yeah, the other one I really enjoyed was how he spun really fast and turned himself into a drill so that he could go below the Weather Wizard's house and drill upwards into the basement. And I gotta say, we've seen him do the spins a lot to do a number of different things, but we've never seen him turn himself into an actual drill. And we're not just talking about regular soil here. He drills, when he drills up into the house, he drills through metal. So gotta say, Superman must be spinning. Apparently he's not fast enough to beat the Flash running, but man, his body can spin fast enough to spin and drill through some metal. So pretty impressive, Superman.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the big things. You see that while the Flash is faster, like on almost every level, the combination of powers together kind of puts Superman in a space where he can just, you know, make some different things happen by combining bits of his powers. And let me say, my favorite part of that, as far as a power level check-in, is how much I appreciate that it shows Superman the thinker, the planner. That it's not just, I'll hit it as hard as possible until it falls down. He has a plan. He thinks about it. When he gets tagged with the Big Blue Boy Scout stuff, I choose to read that in terms of the always be prepared and always have a plan, you know, take on that, as opposed to, oh, he's too goody-goody. Shut up, he's Superman. He's supposed to be good. That's his job. What I want to see is him thinking about clever ways to use his powers to circumvent what for other even superpowered people would be really tricky traps to get out of.
Most definitely. And I think that especially because there's all these constant comparisons between Batman and Superman in particular, that people always assume because Batman's better at that sort of thing, that Superman can't be really a really deep thinker and come up with really great solutions to some of the bigger problems he has to face. A lot of people think he just punches his way through everything. And no, I think you're spot on. I think this is an episode that highlights greatly that he has a different way of thinking through things, and sometimes like the scouts of old, you know, would be prepared when things go south, or able to craft or build tools they need quickly and effectively to accomplish their goals. So, yeah, I think that's a good call out, Joshua. I agree.
I think you see that again. This is not really a power level check-in because it's not seeing anything that Superman hasn't done on this series before. But the two of them working together to stop the oil spill, to clean up the oil spill and send the ship on its way is really great. Like the Flash doing the cleanup while Superman is doing the rescue operation is good stuff, and it shows that even though they have been competitive up until then, and Flash has been even more competitive, they can both kind of put that aside to get the actual job of superheroing done. I really like everything we get with the characters in this episode. Like, I like Weather Wizard's character. I like the Flash is a little abrasive. I think they maybe went just a little overboard with that, but overall, I think the contrast with Superman is really good. And I also really like how Superman falls into a fairly competitive, reasonable, but still competitive space. I had a thought while I was watching this episode, Caleb. This is probably the first time that Superman has ever been able to compete in anything fairly.
Oh, most definitely, where he actually has a chance at losing, where there's actually a real competition going on there. No, completely, I see that there. And I want to say, Joshua, too, I mean, this is really, in my mind, planting the seeds for Justice League. I don't know if they know at this point whether there's serious talks about a Justice League show. I want to say this aired probably in 97, I believe. So at this point, we're still 4 years removed from Justice League on Cartoon Network. But I do wonder, Bruce Timm and Paul Dini and the creators' mind, are they thinking, hey, maybe we should lay some track? Because, like, as you say, we get to see them work effectively as a team. And, when the episode's over, you're probably left wanting a little bit more of that. So, again,
right.
Kudos to, and if it wasn't intentional, just that's kudos to good storytelling, a good world building that we get later on, that they have planted those seeds in case they ever decide to use them. But, it doesn't hinder this particular episode in any way.
We are going to have another really interesting guest star who only shows up the one time in Superman the Animated Series. And it's a Green Lantern. We are going to get a Green Lantern. And so I think probably this is too early for them to be thinking Justice League thoughts, but it's not too early for them to start floating the bubble of the possibility, Like, let's cycle in a couple of these guest stars and see what happens. And to a lesser extent, we've seen it on New Batman Adventures too. Like, Etrigan is not going to join the Justice League, but we're starting to toy with these team-up episodes just to see how much the viewers are prepared to deal with a larger universe. And clearly, we were pretty into it. Before we go out to our media recommendations, I want to mention one scene that is both spectacularly animated and a tremendous character beat for me when it comes to Superman. Superman falling behind in the race that we know he's very committed to, both for charity and because, again, how often does he get to actually compete? Superman falls behind in this race because he slows down to watch the whales be majestic. And that is, again, beautifully animated, but also such a glimpse into Superman's character. And it goes back to something I said about another episode where I wouldn't be surprised if one of the ways Superman uses his powers in his spare time is to just go to parts of the world that would be impossible for normal human beings to go. Like, that's how you get a Fortress of Solitude. But I bet he also, wandered around the Marianas Trench or whatever. He just revels in creation and the ways that he gets to see it. And I love that. And I love that it caused him to fall behind because that is a very Superman choice.
Yeah, great representation of Superman there. And I have to, just throw this question out there, Joshua. I mean, why didn't Superman just utilize his time travel ability to run backwards and turn the axis backwards to time travel and rig the race so he could win? I mean, this is Superman we're talking about here. I've seen the Richard Donner movies. I know it's possible. I think that this episode is short-shrifting Superman's power levels.
This entire series is short-shrifting that level of power for Superman, which is fine because you are dialing into a much more Silver Age level of Superman's powers. They really brought him down a notch or three or 10 for this series, which was also very much of the comic books at the time. I've talked about what John Byrne did to kind of like depower Superman and re-energize him in the post-crisis DC universe. So it's still very in line with that. But you're right. If you look at older periods of Superman's history, he could just do that. But also, he wouldn't do it, Caleb, because he's Superman and he doesn't cheat.
Ooh, fair point. Fair point.
All right, Caleb, I think that's about all we've got to say for Speed Demons. But if other people loved this episode as much as we did, what other alternate media recommendations might you have for them? What else should they be watching, reading, experiencing?
Well, I mean, here's the thing about this episode is it wants us to think it's going to be an episode about a race, but it's actually about something else entirely. So I have to recommend, and I've probably recommended at least one of these on the show before, and I am going to be recommending Justice for Han, Fast 5, because I love most of the Fast and Furious movies. They're dumb, they're ridiculous, but man, they really know how to capture that sense of speed. They're highly entertaining. Like this episode, they are starting with Fast 5 on. They are very much globe-trotting adventures in which they're doing things all over the world. They're heist films. They got a great ensemble cast. Yeah, it's everything I want in a blockbuster. Most specifically, Fast 5, Fast 6, and Fast 7. Fast 8 is hot heaping garbage, and I'm very disappointed in it. Yeah, so specifically those three, if you're going to pick any of them. And also throw out another movie that involves a race that you may think this is kind of about a race, but it's really not. It's about the heist, and it is Logan Lucky. It is a great movie. It's actually... starring, I mean, we've got Adam Driver, you've got Daniel Craig. It's got a great cast, super fun. It's basically, and they even say it in the movie, so the movie's a little too meta for its own good sometimes, but it's basically that they describe it as Ocean's 7-Eleven. I've probably recommended it here before, but it's a great movie. It's a great movie.
I don't think so, because I would remember if you had said that. That's a pretty good high concept pitch. I'm into it.
Yeah, it's set in West Virginia. It's West Virginians holding a heist during it's not NASCAR, but some sort of race. It's not. I mean, it might be drag racing. I can't remember. But all the racing fans listening out there are just tearing their hair out because I can't say the correct type of race. But it is a race involving cars that's not a NASCAR race. I can tell you that. So check it out there.
That's a great segue into mine also, because I went right to the racing aspect as well, and also a story that looks like it's only about racing, but actually it's about all these other things like integrity and your family and found family and all of that good stuff. And I am, of course, talking about 2008's masterpiece. Do feel free to at me, the Wachowskis' Speed Racer.
Joshua, I don't know if I'll at you. I've warmed up on this movie as the years have gone on. It is certainly something truly unique, and it's remarkable it got made. I'll put it that way. You also forgot to mention how it's about the greedy evils of capitalism, but that's really a separate podcast.
Well, that's because I try not to turn every single thing into a political polemic, but 2020 is making that real hard. Thanks for screwing up this one win for me, Caleb. I'm just
sorry,
kidding.
Joshua. Okay, Joshua, but I have to say, I don't think I have to read into that. It's pretty textual in that movie.
It's on the label. It's 100% on the label. Yes, definitely. Capitalism steals the soul of good things, like racing in the case of Speed Racer. That about wraps it up for this animated discussion. If you enjoyed this conversation and would like to join in, come find us on Twitter. Caleb is at CMastersTalk and I'm at Joshua Unruh, and the hashtag is Animated Discussion. Caleb, where else can people find you?
Well, Joshua, I'm the editor-in-chief and a contributor at the Cinematropolis, a website that specializes in in-depth film critique and analysis. And when we're up and running, we publish in-depth film essays on all types of different films. And we also have a podcast called The Cinematic Schematic. You can find those articles and the podcast all over at thecinematropolis.com.
Remember that an animated discussion is a Pulp Diction Productions program and is 100% supported by listeners like you. To find out how you can keep this and our other shows in production, check out patreon.com/pulpdictionproductions. Show your support by pledging at Patreon or by leaving a great review on Apple Podcasts to make it easier for more people to find us and join in the discussion.
And of course, the links to Patreon, Apple Podcasts, our recommendations, and Twitter are all very easy to find in the show notes. Thanks so much for joining us for this animated discussion. We'll be back next time to talk about the new Batman Adventures episode, Love is a Crock.
Until next time, look up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's an animated discussion.